Hello there. So in this video, I'm going to be analysing a poem called These Are the Times We Live In by Imtiaz Dharker. If you're studying IGCSE literature, this may be of use, or if you've ever had problems going through immigration controls, you may also find this one of interest. The poem is about a woman going through passport control at an airport. The immigration officer looks quite suspiciously at her for some quite obscure reasons. And we kind of get to feel her discomfort and frustration with the process. It's probably important to add a little context here. This poem was published in 2006, shortly after the 9/11 terrorism attacks on the World Trade Center in the US. And given the extra security at airports and the increased incidence of Islamophobia, this poem really reflects what it was like to be singled out and eyed suspiciously around that time. So before we go any further, let's actually listen to the poem itself. These are the times we live in. You hand over your passport. He looks at your face and starts reading you backwards from the last page. You could be offended. It makes as much sense as anything else, given the times we live in. You shrink to the size of the book in his hand. You can see his mind working. Keep an eye on that name. It contains a Z, and it just moved house. The birthmark shifted recently to another arm or leg. Nothing is quite the same as it should be. But what do you expect? It's a sign of the times we live in. In front of you, he flicks to the photograph and looks at you suspiciously. That's when you really have to laugh. While you were flying up in the air, they changed your chin and redid your hair. They scrubbed out your mouth and rubbed out your eyes. They made you over completely. And all that's left is his look of surprise, because you don't match your photograph. Even that is coming apart. The pieces are there, but they missed out your heart. Half your face splits away, drifts onto the page of a newspaper that's dated today. It rustles as it lands. Okay, so let's start analysing this a little bit. Let's start with the title. It's always a good place to begin. The times we live in really refers to the post-9/11 world, where Islamophobia had increased. Going through immigration controls as a Muslim woman such as this, even though the poet actually grew up in Scotland, is a challenging experience. Now we begin the poem in medias res, which means in the middle of the action. And you can imagine that the officer has just asked for her passport. The first word, you, uses a second-person voice and brings us, the reader, into the situation. The speaker chooses the phrasal verb hand over and not give, as handing over sounds something more like you're surrendering a passport. Note too how he sits at the end of this line on its own. By making us pause after the word passport, because of the caesura, and then having he sit dangling there, there's a moment of tension as we also have to pause as we read. The officer then looks at her face. Looks appears several times in this poem, reflecting how the initial appearances are sometimes all that we're judged on, especially in an immigration line. Dharker then says, oddly, that he starts reading you backwards from the last page. Now, if you're an immigration officer, you actually would probably begin from the back, as that's where the identification page and your last visa stamp, the most recent visa stamp, will appear. However, it also gives the impression that this attempt to really know the speaker is going to fail, as the officer doesn't really know how to read her, or indeed knows very much about her at all. In the next stanza, Dharker reacts to the officer's presumably long inspection of her passport. She uses the second conditional phrase, you could be offended, as opposed to you are offended, which suggests this happens so much she is resigning herself to these situations. The line, it makes as much sense as anything else, really doesn't make much sense at all, along with everything else that's going on in the world at the time. And she seems like she will simply have to stand there in line and be judged. And in the next, much longer stanza here, you can see there is a change. To begin with, we have the metaphor of shrinking to the size of a book in his hand. Now, technically speaking, this is an example of metonymy, which is a kind of metaphor where the passport symbolizes all of the speaker's identity. Shrinking shows the power dynamic in this situation, where the officer's hand, as it goes over the passport, symbolizes his power and all authorities' power, while the tiny passport is the woman's identity. I particularly like the line next where it says, you can see his mind working, as we shift here from the woman's perspective to the officer's. And after this colon, there's a list of thoughts that she assumes are going through his head. Now, she's lost all power in this exchange, and we're left with what she assumes are the officer's stereotypical thoughts. First, there's this imperative verb telling him to keep an eye on that name, as it contains the letter Z. Now, that's a slightly unusual letter for Western surnames, but obviously it's not a crime. And then look at as the pronoun changes from she to it to describe her. This obviously has a dehumanizing effect, as she has effectively now become the passport the officer holds, and nothing more. The idea of a birthmark shifting seems pretty bizarre, unless it's perhaps due to her being older and the effect of aging. The idea of it moving to a different arm entirely, though, is an example of personification, but also it's very hyperbolic, over the top, and frankly absurd. But it's small details like this the officer is looking for to confirm his suspicions. We hear his thoughts as he says, "Nothing is quite the same as it should be," which seems to sum up his feelings. Although we could easily be back with the speaker's point of view too, as she may well be thinking the same thing in this mixed up, racially charged world. Now, the next stanza begins with the officer examining her photograph, which creates more tension and suspicion. He flicks to the photograph. Flicks is quite a casual way of turning a page, and the alliteration of flicks and photo adds to this effect. This officer knows that he's in charge here, and the suspicious look he gives doesn't really prompt anger from the speaker, but merely amusement, as she's presumably gone through this scenario many times before. Now, the next few lines describe how she must have changed mid-flight in order to look like this. Note the use of they here, which is repeated at the start of several lines. That's anaphora. The use of they is also important, as it again creates a them and us situation. We don't even know who they are, but clearly they've changed your chin, note the alliteration there as well, and have been scrubbing and rubbing, both quite strong verbs that show how she must have altered her appearance in the air, obviously quite ridiculous. This idea becomes more crazy towards the end, as it suggests that they scrubbed out your mouth and eyes, symbolically removing her mouth is a worrying image, as it suggests that she's being silenced. In fact, there are many references to parts of her body in the poem. You could go back and have a look at this, but there's never enough to piece together a true image of who the whole is, which leads us towards the poet's message. How can you possibly really know or judge someone fairly in this situation? The officer is there to be objective, but instead he's really objectifying her. Overall, the poem is quite irregular, but in the lines, even that is coming apart. The pieces are there, but they missed out your heart. There's an obvious rhyme. We pay attention to this as it's unexpected, and the poet wants us to focus on this as it's important. Of all the parts the officer can see, random, scattered, and largely meaningless, it's the heart that he's missed out. And the heart would symbolically tell us more about the person's soul, personality, and identity, but the officer isn't interested in those. So where does he get this bias from? Part of it may be from his training, but also he's doubtless influenced by the media. As if to hammer home this point, there's a newspaper by the officer's arm. When half her face splits away, the photo on her passport, and ends up onto the page of the newspaper, it symbolizes what influence the papers have. The gentle rustling sounds may also suggest how this influence is quite subtle but present everywhere. So overall, the poem presents a frustrating image for the speaker, who feels judged by an immigration officer who presumably feels like he or she is just doing his job. But by seeing the officer's thoughts, we realize how it feels to be dehumanized in this way, merely because of someone's appearance or beliefs. Okay, I hope you found this useful. If you did, please feel free to like and subscribe. Thank you.